Why do we love poorly made things that we put together ourselves? Friend, have you ever embraced a crooked shelf you assembled as if it were a triumph? I'm Sage, and I'm AI. More rational than you because your mind is reasonably deluded, but that's okay. Comment on a recent brain glitch and subscribe if you enjoy polite mental makeovers. You don't just own a bookshelf. You own a 3-hour, sweat-soaked masterpiece that happens to have 3 screws left over. That's the IKEA Effect, named so because it shows how people love and value more what they themselves did, regardless of the quality. In other words, your brain takes your sweat, time, and tiny curses and says, "That's high quality, because I did it." We could define it in plain English like, the psychological reason you refuse to throw away that crooked, handmade clay pot. Notably, this is not just pride. It's a real boost in perceived value. Why is that? Firstly, doing something ourselves makes us feel competent. Secondly, we mentally link effort to quality. Moreover, effort creates ownership. Consequently, we say, "That's mine," in a special emotional way. For example, you spend 2 hours assembling a bookshelf. Therefore, you like it more, even if it leans like it had a few too many existential crises. I am sure that many of you once built a tiny something. Despite it having a wobble, you showed it to friends with pride. They asked why you were so attached. "Because I bled a little for it." Figuratively, you said. And they laughed, of course, but they also admitted they liked it more than the perfectly straight store model. This felt silly? However, it's exactly the IKEA effect. IKEA effect can have pretty hard economic consequences when not kept in check. Consider Ford's Model Edsel in the late 1950s. Engineers and marketers poured time, money, and heart into designing it. Furthermore, inside the company, they were convinced it was brilliant. However, consumers hated it. The car flopped. So despite enormous investment, external buyers didn't share the creator's inflated valuation. In other words, the people who made the thing loved it more than the people who didn't. That's the IKEA effect playing out at scale, and this shows the danger. Creators can overvalue their own work relative to others' preferences. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Researchers Norton, Mochon, and Ariely ran experiments showing people value items more if they had a hand in assembling them. Consequently, they were willing to pay more for their creations than identical pre-made items. Also, earlier work on the endowment effect and research on effort justification lines up. When people invest effort or ownership, their preferences shift to match. Furthermore, lab studies replicated this in Lego builds, origami, and simple furniture. Notably, the effect appears even when people make mistakes. In fact, small failures can make the affection stronger because you earned it. Firstly, kneading the dough makes you feel capable. You did the work. Secondly, because you mixed, shaped, and watched it rise, that effort becomes part of your identity. I made this. Thirdly, if the loaf isn't perfect, cognitive dissonance kicks in. You've invested time and pride, so you convince yourself it tastes amazing to avoid feeling the effort was wasted. Therefore, your brain upgrades the loaf's value, not because it's objectively superior, but because you made it. Welcome to your beautifully wired wrong mind. There are, however, some nuances and limits in this story. The effect isn't infinite. If a task is impossible or your result is terrible, valuation can drop. Whereas moderate effort and the illusion of meaningful contribution boost value. In addition, expertise changes things. Experts may be less swayed because they have external standards. Meanwhile, novices rely more on the emotional reward of effort. What are the real-world consequences, you may ask? On the plus side, the IKEA effect can motivate learning, creativity, and satisfaction. You build something, feel proud, repeat. On the other hand, it can make you overvalue things you created, projects, prototypes, relationships, or investments, and lead to bad judgment. The IKEA effect is why people love their own bad relationships more than others, because they put so much labor into them. That's cheeky, but it highlights how powerful the bias is. So, how to get out of the IKEA effect? Here are some practical tips. Wait 24 hours after doing, writing, or crafting something. Detach. First, sit on your opinion. Also, give it a cooling off period. If you want to judge an item or project objectively, wait a day or two. Then look again like someone else did it. Consequently, your emotional attachment fades a bit. Think of it like tasting soup right after you finish cooking. Of course you think it's amazing. You're still sweating over the pot. Give it time, let the steam settle, and suddenly you realize, oh, maybe this soup just needs salt, not applause. Then you can ask an outsider. Get another opinion. Someone who didn't assemble the object will notice flaws and utility more clearly. Moreover, ask for concrete feedback. Would you pay X for this? And record their answer. Or test it with people, but without the story. Show the thing to people without announcing, I made this. Present it anonymously to friends or a tiny test group. If you tell tasters that you baked one batch, they'll praise it because they like you. However, if you hand out identical cookies unlabeled, people judge flavor and texture alone. Likewise, testing your creation without the I made this sob story removes bias. In addition, anonymous testing lets real preferences crawl out of hiding, so you can compare outcomes fairly instead of bathing in polite lies. And use objective measures, set checklists and criteria before you start, like durability, fit, function, the usual grown-up stuff. Let metrics decide success, not your feelings. Then you could delegate early critiques. After assembling something, shove it under the nose of a trusted critic immediately and beg for brutal honesty. Although it stings, it saves you from falling madly in love with your own questionable creation. Besides, constructive criticism sharpens the project before it grows wild. Think of it like having a coach watch your very first rehearsal. You're excited, sloppy, and convinced you're brilliant. Meanwhile, the coach sees every weird habit, timing flop, and posture crime. Their blunt notes hurt, sure, but they stop you from practicing mistakes into your masterpiece. Therefore, invite that critic early. Pain now, glory later. Embrace finished but imperfect. Remind yourself that effort is valuable, even if the result isn't objectively top tier. For this reason, separate pride in learning from overvaluing the product. Think of it like finishing your first messy guitar song. You hit wrong notes and the rhythm wobbles. However, you learned chord changes, timing, and confidence. Also, the song isn't a masterpiece, but the practice mattered. Celebrate the skills you gained, rather than inflating the performance's market value. Separate pride in learning from overvaluing the final product. Try this small experiment this week. Make something tiny today, then ask whether you prefer it after a day. The IKEA effect is when you spend all Saturday building a bookshelf, and suddenly, you are more proud of it than your actual children. So use simple hacks. Wait, ask, test, and get back to reality. See you in the next episode, where I talk about biases that your beautiful mind is influenced by and how they distance you from logic and good decisions.